Right now, your body is probably comfortable. A thermostat somewhere is holding the air at a gentle 20 degrees. You barely notice the temperature at all. But 20,000 years ago, your ancestors woke up every single day to a world that wanted to kill them with cold. The average temperature was 10 degrees lower than today. Ice sheets a mile thick covered most of North America and Europe. And somehow, against every reasonable expectation, humans didn't just survive it. They thrived. The real answer isn't about thick fur or lucky genetics. It's far stranger than that. Picture the scene. A frozen steppe stretches to the horizon. Wind cuts across open tundra with nothing to block it for hundreds of miles. There are no trees for shelter, no caves in sight, and the sun barely clears the horizon before disappearing again. This was Ice Age Europe. This was home. You'd think a species built for the warm savannas of Africa would have no business living here. And you'd be right. Biologically, humans are terrible in the cold. You have no fur coat. Your fat layer is modest compared to a seal or a polar bear. Your extremities lose heat fast. By every physical measure, you should have frozen and died out. So what happened? The answer starts with a researcher named Rick Potts, who runs the Human Origins program at the Smithsonian. Potts proposed something called variability selection. His idea wasn't that humans adapted to cold specifically. It was that humans evolved to adapt to change itself. Millions of years of shifting African climates, wet seasons followed by droughts, forests turning to grasslands and back again, had already trained the human lineage to be flexible rather than specialized. A polar bear is a master of one environment. A human is a master of adjusting to any environment. That flexibility became the real survival tool, and the Ice Age was simply the biggest test it ever faced. Here's where it gets stranger. The cold didn't just test human bodies. It rewired human behavior. Think about what cold actually demands. You can't just wait it out. You have to act. You need fire, and fire needs fuel, which means planning ahead. You need shelter, which means construction. You need clothing that actually works, not just a draped hide but fitted, sewn protection. And you need all of this before the sun goes down, because in an Ice Age winter, one bad night can be the last night. Archaeologist John Hoffaker, who has spent decades studying Ice Age sites in Russia and Ukraine, points to something remarkable in the archaeological record. Around 40,000 years ago, at the coldest, harshest sites in human history, you don't see technology getting simpler. You see it exploding in complexity. Odd needles appear. Multi-layered clothing appears. Semi-subterranean pit houses, built partly underground for insulation, appear, some framed with mammoth bones because wood was too scarce to waste. This wasn't survival by brute toughness. This was survival by engineering. Pause on that needle for a second. It seems small. It's bone barely longer than your finger with a tiny hole drilled through one end. But that needle is arguably one of the most important inventions in human history. A draped animal hide leaves gaps. Wind finds every gap. But a needle lets you tailor clothing, layer it, seal it against your skin the way a modern parka seals against yours. Without it, humans could not have pushed north into Siberia. Without pushing into Siberia, humans never crossed the land bridge into the Americas. One tiny tool and an entire hemisphere opens up. But tools alone don't explain everything either. Because cold isn't just a physical problem. It's a social one. Here's a question worth sitting with. Could you survive an Ice Age winter completely alone? Almost certainly not. And your ancestors knew it. Anthropologists studying hunter-gatherer groups that still exist today, like the Jew/Hoansi of the Kalahari, or historically the Inuit of the Arctic, have documented something called risk pooling. In brutal, unpredictable environments, sharing food and resources across a wide social network isn't generosity. It's math. If you hunt today and I hunt tomorrow, and we share regardless of who succeeds, both of us survive the days when luck runs out. Anthropologist Kim Hill, who has spent years studying foraging societies, found that these food-sharing networks often stretch across dozens of unrelated families, forming a kind of insurance system with no paperwork and no bank. Your ancestors weren't just biologically flexible. They were socially engineered to spread risk across a group, because the Ice Age made isolation a death sentence. This is also, probably, where a lot of very human behaviors were born. Storytelling around a fire wasn't just entertainment. It transmitted survival knowledge across generations without anyone having to relearn it from scratch. Ritual and shared belief bound strangers into cooperative groups large enough to survive a famine. Even your instinct to feel uneasy when excluded from a group, that sharp sting of social rejection, may be an evolutionary alarm bell left over from a time when being cut off from the group wasn't just lonely. It was fatal. Now here's the twist that even most people who know a bit about the Ice Age miss. The cold wasn't constant. It wasn't one long unbroken freeze. It came in violent swings. Geneticist Svante Pääbo, famous for sequencing the Neanderthal genome, and climate researchers working alongside him have shown that ice cores and ocean sediment records reveal the climate lurching between extreme cold and relative warmth over spans as short as a few decades, sometimes even faster. Imagine planning your entire way of life around one climate, only to have it flip within a single lifetime. This matters because it changes the whole story. Humans didn't just endure one difficult, static winter for 10,000 years. They endured a climate that kept breaking its own rules. And the species that had already built its survival strategy around flexibility, rather than specialization, was uniquely positioned to keep adjusting when everyone else's playbook stopped working. Compare that to the Neanderthals who lived through many of the same Ice Age conditions in Europe. They were, in some ways, better physically built for cold than modern humans, with stockier frames and larger nasal cavities suited for warming frigid air. And yet they eventually disappeared while modern humans expanded. Researchers still debate exactly why, but one leading idea discussed extensively in Pablo's work and later research building on it, is that it wasn't raw physical toughness that decided the outcome. It was the flexibility of technology, clothing, and especially large-scale cooperative networks. Neanderthal groups appear to have been smaller and more isolated. When the climate lurched again, smaller networks had fewer people to lean on. So if you strip away the myth of the caveman gritting his teeth through the cold, what you actually find is something closer to a small, mobile engineering team. Tailored clothing built for insulation and range of motion. Semi-underground architecture using whatever materials were available, even the bones of dead giants. Fire management passed down and protected like sacred knowledge. And above all, wide, trust-based networks of people who agreed, without ever writing it down, that no one starves alone. None of this required a special Ice Age gene. It required the same brain, the same flexible, cooperative, tool-building brain that you're using right now to follow this sentence. And this is where it comes back to you. That flexibility didn't disappear when the ice retreated 12,000 years ago. It's still the operating system running underneath everything you do. When your circumstances change suddenly, a lost job, a move to a new city, an unexpected diagnosis, you don't have a specialized instinct for that exact situation. What you have is the same ancient toolkit. Build something new. Lean on other people. Share the risk so no single person carries it all. Adjust and keep adjusting. You'll never sew a mammoth hide parka with a bone needle. You'll probably never need to. But every time you ask for help instead of struggling alone, every time you adapt to a plan falling apart, you're running a program that was field-tested across the coldest, harshest winters our species has ever faced. Tonight, when you reach for a thermostat instead of a fire pit, remember that comfort is new. The flexibility that got you here is not.